Harry's wife, Air Force None. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Harry's wife once brought legal action against Associated Newspapers Limited, which owns the Daily Mail. Her claims succeeded, although, on a strict analysis of the judgment, the outcome was questionable, and there was the suggestion that it might have been a case of the judiciary bending over backwards to assist a member of the royal family, as Harry's wife was. Nevertheless, the problem with Harry's wife, as I have repeatedly explained to you, that driven by her narcissism, which governs all her interactions with people or contemplated interactions, it's very good at getting control in the moment. Accordingly, as a consequence of the affront that she received, the threat to control with the publication of a letter written to her father, she then sought to nullify that threat to control by issuing legal proceedings. Harry's wife is particularly litigious, and she's infected Harry with that mindset also. Thus she brings the proceedings, and she was vindicated, succeeding in her claim against Associated Newspapers Limited. However, typically, she has no regard for the collateral consequences because her narcissism does not allow her to look ahead. It doesn't allow her to consider, if I do this, what are the ramifications? That's typical of lesser and mid-range narcissists. Often, this isn't such a great problem because the behaviour of the lesser and mid-ranger tends to be more localized, but with somebody like Harry's wife, she decides that she's going to attack the media, which is very foolish because the media is a bigger, more effective, and longer in the tooth than she will ever be. That where she decides to try and take it by the tail, it's going to turn round and bite her. It might not do it immediately, but it's going to keep going at her again and again and again. If, as she had said that she wanted, she had slunk off to the United States and sought privacy, for the most part, they'd have been left alone because they wouldn't have been putting themselves out there to have potshots taken at them. And furthermore, if she hadn't bothered taking legal action in what ultimately was a completely meaningless case, she would not have brought the wrath of the media against her, and particularly the Mail Online, because ever since, the Mail has never shirked an opportunity to have a dig at her. And we find the latest example of that as a consequence of the reportage about the fact that Harry and Harry's wife asked to fly to the United States on Air Force One with Joe Biden after the Queen's funeral, but they were denied. The Queen's funeral was last September. That is some nearly 10 months ago. And in the circumstances, this information will have been readily available to the Daily Mail for quite some time. But they've sat on it, like they're sitting on a wealth of information about Harry's wife. And because Harry's wife is of low cognitive function and focused in the moment, and isn't practiced at these matters, she's going to find that again and again the Mail and other news outlets are going to steadily release what they know about her. She thinks that she's clever. She thinks that she wins the PR war, but she's losing. Not only is she losing in terms of her plummeting popularity, but she's losing because repeatedly all of the things that she's done in the past, the misbehaviours, the disgraceful actions, the snubs, they're stored up. Journalists do this. I know, for example, as a consequence of one of my journalist friends, there's a particularly well-known British television presenter who's particularly prominent and quite outspoken. But largely, he has the status of being a golden boy, so a lot of the material that they have amassed about his behaviour, which, put it bluntly, he's a shagger, they don't release it because they view that a majority of the public wouldn't buy it. There's plenty of people that have this massive information about them. They have the skeletons in the cupboards, they have the dirty secrets, etc. And in some instances, those public figures are never touched. With others, it's stored up, waiting for the time that they do something where the appropriate proprietor says it's open season on them. My journalist friend has confirmed as such. With Harry's wife, not only is it open season on her, as I explained some time ago, but there's still plenty more that they will release about her when they view that the time is right. And this is another example of that. Harry's wife acts with a sense of entitlement, shows no accountability for her behaviours, is demanding and haughty and grandiose. Who does she think she is? Oh, we can just hop on Air Force One like it's a fucking bus. No. But she believes that she can. And this information will have arisen many months ago, back last September, and has been held to be released now as part of the ongoing campaign to discredit her. Emily Goodin, of the Daily Mail, explains Prince Harry and Harry's wife wanted to ride back to the United States on Air Force One after the Queen's funeral, but the request was denied by the White House in case it caused a commotion, sources have revealed to dailymail.com. The initiative that failed was understood to have been part of a campaign by the Sussexes to gain political influence in the United States as they settled into life in California. Harry's wife, you'll recall, publicly advocated for paid family leave to lawmakers on Capitol Hill and then did nothing about it, and worked behind the scenes to connect with the Bidens, dailymail.com discovered from speaking to many current and former officials in the Biden administration and in the British government. Thus, this arrogant nobody believes that she could have a lift with the president to go back to the United States on Air Force One. Sleepy Joe would have ensured that he would have fallen straight asleep if for some reason she had been on the same flight as him. Can you imagine? She would have been wittering on with some beige word salad, trying to talk to her and to him rather, and Jill Biden, espousing her brilliant initiatives, in her world, of course, causing many people to want to reach for a Secret Service pistol and off themselves to avoid having to listen to her droning on about herself. It's not a surprise at all that she would ask to fly on Air Force One. She lacks the boundary recognition. She believes that she's the equal of the president. She believes she's going to be the president. She believes herself to be so important that she ought to have a place. Many of you may well be thinking, the utter brass neck of this woman. Who does she think she is? She thinks she's Harry's wife, the most important person in the universe. And as a consequence of her sense of entitlement and lack of boundary recognition, part of her narcissism, she believes that she can go where she wants, whenever she wants, and how she ever chooses, which includes cadging a lift on Air Force One. It's also worth bearing in mind what would be the situation about payment. Because invariably, of course, the American taxpayer pays for the president when he's on official business. The Democrat Party pay for the flights when Air Force One is being used for campaigning. Biden himself pays for his children and his grandchildren to fly on Air Force One. But I couldn't see that Harry and Harry's wife would say, oh, we'll pay our way by cadging a lift. She'll have expected to have been given the flight for free. Why? Because it's her. Who wouldn't want to fly with her? Who wouldn't want to have her presence? And therefore, you should let her fly for free. Of course, the fact that they reached out through their staff to White House to ask if Harry and Harry's wife could get a ride back to the United States on Air Force One is really no surprise when it comes to Harry's wife. As the Daily Mail reports, it would have been a grand photo op. Harry and Harry's wife climbing the steps of the famous blue and white 747 to wave alongside the President, First Lady of the United States. And believe me, if that had happened, Harry's wife would have believed that she was the President. Character trait acquisition. However, as the Mail reports, it was an immediate no from the Americans. No. I dare say it would also have been a Foxtrot Oscar. Sources with knowledge of the decision said there was barely any discussion on the issue, just a general agreement that the request was a non-starter. It would have caused such a commotion. It would have strained relations with the palace and the new king, another source told dailymail.com. There's Harry's wife, trying to cadge a lift, suggesting what? Did she chip in for the petrol, the aviation fuel? But it's no surprise when it comes to Harry's wife. She believes that she's aligned with the Bidens, that she's as important as they are, that they simply would want her on the flight. And therefore she also wouldn't understand that she'd been rejected. She'd be perplexed. She wouldn't see it as cheeky. I know many people who've commented on this story can't believe the cheek of her for asking. I can. It's what she does. It doesn't even cross her mind to think, this is a bit of a try-on, this is a bit cheeky. She doesn't think in such terms. It's quite simply, we should fly back on Air Force One. Joe and Jill will be delighted to have a chat with us, and it'll give me an opportunity to furnish them with some of my ideas and get their support for me to become the next president of the United States. She seriously thinks that way because she's deluded, and therefore she issues an instruction to ensure that a staff member makes it so. It didn't fly, a bit like her, and in the circumstances the knockback will have wounded her. She'd have been perplexed. Of course, she wasn't able to hoover Joe Biden to say, hey, Joe, come on, let me on the plane. I should be there with you. That wasn't available to her. So she'd have moaned and whinged to Ginge and her own staff. I don't understand. They're such good friends of mine, close personal friends. There must be a mistake. They must have thought I was somebody else. Or, well, how rude, but I suppose we'll find our own way back, won't we, Harry? Oh, yeah, absolutely, my little pumpernickel. So she'll have complained and received a sympathetic response from old Ginger Bollocks, which will then enable her to subconsciously have that sense of control. But there are many things to take from this story. The first, it just underpins the sense of entitlement, lack of accountability, lack of emotional empathy, grandiosity, lack of boundary recognition of Harry's wife, all as a consequence of her narcissism. Secondly, it demonstrates the wounding that she would experience by being knocked back, and also the speed at which it was done. It wasn't even a consideration. There wasn't an even, should we? It was not a chance. 3, it also demonstrates the Biden administration's loyalty to the royals, seeing them as the right horse to back compared to that of Harry's wife. Fourthly, it demonstrates the ridiculous nature of Harry's wife in terms of taking on the media, and the media now engaging in a steady drip feed of stories to discredit her again and again and again, and there's plenty more where that came from. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.